Hey everyone, I am making a little extra video. I've decided to do these every now and then. I guess it depends on what the specific topic is as to how long the video will end up being. But in this case, I had two questions directed at me that I wanted to answer and sort of expand on in the context of everything that we've been understanding recently. So the first is a question regarding, was not so much a question as a desire to, for us to elaborate on the notion of listening to our intuition. And I guess a lot of that comes down to trust. It's like, what do we trust? Well, the obvious, or should I say it's not so much obvious as it is direct answer to that is that when we love ourselves and we're in total acceptance of ourselves, we don't process information anymore through the veil of our emotional response to the outside. So in that sense, the more we are free of that, the more we just intuitively know what intuition is. So the chances are that if you're watching this, then you have a pretty developed intuition. I can't tell if your sense of intuition is the same as mine. I imagine that there are variations on that. And I imagine that it's like a craft. It's something that we hone over time, over a period of time, and the awakening is essentially something being triggered, and we're taking that term back, trigger in the positive sense, triggered within us. It's an awakening within our DNA, I believe. And I think that we're moving more and more into a world where 5D consciousness is something that we live in, and we live isolated from certain aspects of 3D living, from changing into that higher consciousness. And in that higher consciousness, I think these things sort of, we get there fully when we develop all of these gifts. Like, I really do think that we will become increasingly, I don't know what they are. I could imagine maybe there's something about telekinesis, or there's things, just, knowing the truth of everything. So, what kind of accountability would be built into our value system if there was total transparency of thought, because we found ourselves confronted with any other person, that they would see exactly what we were thinking. Well, that would force us into elevating our consciousness to such a degree, and that, I imagine, would be the fullness of 5D, and therefore at that point things like intuition would no longer be separate. That would be a compartment within whatever that state of consciousness would be. I don't know. I think that makes sense. But in terms of listening to our intuition and not being tricked by our ego instead, we have to understand that distinction. We have to understand the difference between reacting to something and well, I suppose when we react to something with anything other than centeredness and calm, there is something about that that is off. And the second question, which is I suppose the question, but it's more is an elaboration on what we were just talking about. Learning how to hear the messages that come during the retrogrades and how to heed that message telling you this is a trigger and you need to work through it. Well, I think what we have to look at is that we have to trust the experiences that we're being given. I guess our intuition, it sort of plays in two directions. There's an intuition towards other people, but there's also an intuition unto ourselves, right? And because we're not always alert to everything within ourselves. So the more in tune we are with our inner intuition, the more we know how to take care of our needs, and on all levels. So I guess to take that full circle, any message that you receive at any time, by process of elimination, should always be in defense of your well-being. You're not going to be receiving any kind of messages that are out of your control or out of the natural flow of events, and that aren't in your own favor. So I guess if that isn't clear in the moment when you're deciphering like a message, then that's when you probably don't trust your intuition, right? And unfortunately, that is probably a long-term negotiation that when we're still dealing with 3D issues, we're going to have to get used to the possibility that we're wrong about things, because that's how we learn. So anyway, I hope that answered. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is just to remember to trust that no matter what happens, the universe has your back. And as long as we're breathing and capable of functioning, we're on a mission, and it's just going to keep going and going and going. So focus on keeping the faith, and I'm finding more of it. There you go. That's it. Okay, so this is the next part of this random video that I am recording in the middle of the cycle, and forgive me for the way that I look and for what I am well, how I'm recording this, because it's very unprofessional and amateurish, but it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, sometimes we just have to talk. And what I want to talk about after doing that brief Q&A is stupidity and the struggles of those of us that exist in pursuit of 5D existence when having to be anchored in 3D stupidity. Because it is extremely taxing when you are going through that process of existing on a different level from the majority of people in your midst. It strikes me more and more that I'm realizing and observing people anchored in 3D that they don't really exist for anything other than the immediacy of pleasure. Eating seems to be an enormous focus. It's like a go-to, almost like a tick for people. And when you really think about that, it's stuffing your feelings, it's stuffing your ability to challenge yourself to be aware on a different level. And I see this a lot. And there's like zero self-respect in any of it. That's the strangest part of it, is to observe the mindlessness, the inability to be conscious and aware of others, to only be in pursuit of self satiation, self-satisfaction, to hide behind labels. This is the worst. I am this. I am my job. I am my role in a family. I am my role in an organization. We put all these conditions upon ourselves in 3D that are not particularly expansive and not particularly, they don't facilitate any other experience of life other than these very, very basic needs being met. And the reality is that the need is never met. There's always a lack, a sense of lack in any case. It's not that there really is a lack, but there's a sense of lack. And this in turn keeps us anchored in that very limited spectrum. And personally, it provokes anger in me. I want to lash out, because to me, the way that it feels is, it feels like it's a restriction that's put upon me, because I'm living in my own construct based upon a conscious evolutionary process, and others in my environment are very unconscious about pretty much everything. When you start looking at life outside of an existence of definition by label, it becomes repellent to hear how many labels people stick on everything. Their politics, their intellect, their purpose, their which is their experience on every level. It comes down to like, what brand do you consume? What temporary fix are you going to seek attainment of in order to avoid self-awareness and purposefulness? True purposefulness, like very bright there. Anyway, so much of this then in turn can have a negative effect on our process of acknowledgement and acquiescence to our intuition, because to feel those things and to become aware of them, we naturally fall into a chasm. Like there's sort of a sense of discord between the elation and the higher frequency of the results of the work that we do on ourselves, and then the big, massive dump that the unevolved mind and soul insist upon inflicting upon everyone, because the vast majority of people are they're desperately holding on to keep their sense of normalcy in place, to be in the position where they know their cues, they know the landscape of what they see life as. And any of us in life, when we have a massive overhaul of our understanding of reality, we go through crisis. So if you've experienced that on a microcosmic level, then you're the buildup of anticipation and fear and dread of that permeating your sense of reality, to then actually create a much bigger experience of chaos and destruction in order to rebuild. That's a big no-no to the majority of people that are in that state of mind, and they can't move beyond it. They won't allow themselves to move beyond it, and there will be a million and one excuses for that. I mean, even in an era of pandemic where, it's been proven that, for better or worse, always expect the unexpected. That is the magic and tragedy of life, depending on how you look at it, right? Anything can happen. You cannot say with certainty that anything will or will not happen. But you can live your life with intentionality, and you can live your life intuitively, and you can live your life working to develop that rapport within yourself, between your intuition and your experience. And I imagine with time, the better we get at that, the more our reality reflects back to us something authentic and something evolutionary that serves our higher self and our higher purpose. But again, there's something deeply alienating about experiencing something like that, and then at the same time having to observe a different set of rules and a different set of circumstances that apply to those stubbornly anchored in their 3D experience. So I would say that we're in for quite a challenge with that kind of thing in the weeks and months ahead. So the messages that we receive intuitively will inevitably be, in great part, directives towards self-preservation, while allowing ourselves the room to grow and evolve and step up, to whatever our next needed experience And we simply have to work consciously with passion and belief in order to, in other words, in faith, to circumvent the conditions of our physical reality that try to limit us into adhering to the limitations that other people are intently attached to. This probably will feel a little lonely for a lot of us. It already has felt very lonely on many levels, but I imagine that that probably won't resolve itself until we have done all of that work and reached a place of a place where of, I guess, neutrality on some level, where then we can trampoline off into a new reality with soul tribe energies coming into unison and eventually reunion. It's a lot to experience, and this week is I can feel it. I can feel it's very there's a huge amount of testing energy in these retrogrades. So you may get the feeling that you thought that you had moved past some very pivotal things, things that really are almost like scratching your head, like, what the fuck, how on earth am I back here? But have no fear, that is simply a part of the process. And there is no judgment. There is just having the experience and focusing on getting out of the experience opportunities to move beyond the limitations that you have put upon yourself, and that subsequently now you're finding other people are putting upon yourself because you've moved beyond them. So there's always going to be a source of resistance as a result of your progress. When we progress, there will inevitably be resistance manifests in some shape or form in our environment. A person says something to us that, they don't know the process that we've been through. They don't have an understanding of what we are learning to invest in and institutionalize in our personal lives. They just sense something that is a threat to their reality. And so, survival of the fittest, that instinct of fight or flight kicks in with people that are anchored in 3D energies, and they will drag you down and try to tear like the beauty off of you in order for them not to feel as though they've missed out on something, or that somebody else is getting to experience what they don't have the courage to face. And this is going to be an ongoing issue for those of us in this process, until eventually it's no longer an issue, and that will happen. And I have a feeling that's going to happen the more and more we step into alignment with our intuitive powers, and with these sort of extra sensory evolutionary awakenings that we're going through. And discomfort is just a part of the process of growth. So, on that note, I'm going back into the shadows, as you can see from the image, and I think I've spoken enough on this for now, and this will essentially end our special midweek session. Until our weekly later this week, I wish you all the best. And for those of you who are attached to some form of regular sign-off, and you know who you are, namaste.